are the Lit Ladies.
I'm Christie.
I'm Kelly.
And I'm Carissa.
3 writers and moms exploring how to live out our faith in our literary lives.
We span the country from the coasts to the Midwest, and with different stages of life, careers, and favorite genres, we're sure to cover the literary landscape.
In every episode, we'll discuss books we love, reading life, and writing craft, using the Bible as our guide for beauty, goodness, and truth. New episodes drop every other Friday.
Welcome to one of our most unique episodes to date. We are so excited to be doing a crossover episode with the Lit Ladies podcast. That's right, we are doing a crossover episode. This episode will air on both of our podcast platforms so that our Bookish besties and the Lit Lady girlies can tune in. We are so excited to be chatting with these amazing ladies. If you're listening from the Book Solid Pod family, then let us tell you all about the Lit Ladies, hosted by Christie, Kelly, and Carissa. The Lit Ladies is a podcast exploring how to live out your faith in your literary life, with episodes covering topics like cozy reads to add to your TBR, all the way to topics like the state of Christian fiction. We are so excited to share the podcast and bookish space with these ladies. If you're listening from the Lit Ladies podcast, welcome to the Book Solid Pod fam. I'm Hannah Caitlin, and I co-host this podcast with my wonderful and fabulous bestie, Stephanie Mack. We're both authors on the traditional path, and the Book Solid podcast exists to connect readers with authors from all paths, whether it be indie or traditional, and to get you book solid, of course, by adding solid reads to your TBR. We are so excited. So welcome, ladies, to the Book Solid podcast, and we're so happy to be on the Lit Ladies podcast.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Hannah. That was the perfect introduction, and welcome to you, Lit Ladies. It has been so much fun to grow in our bookish friendship and connection with 2 of you, Christie and Kelly, since ACFW. Hannah and I got to hang out with them in the flesh and get to know each other better. And Carissa, we've heard such wonderful things, so it's nice to officially meet you. And there are so many different topics we could tackle together today, but we thought it would be particularly fun to do our own Trend Watch episode. We are all avid readers as well as writers at different points along our publishing journey. And books are just a huge part of our lives. We are interacting with other readers, writers, and of course, books pretty much every single day. So today we'll each be sharing a trend and whether or not these trends are here to stay and just all of our thoughts surrounding the different topics. So we are going to go around and introduce ourselves to kick it off to give you guys the ability to put the voice to the name. So I am Stephanie.
And I'm Hannah, you guys.
I'm Carissa.
I'm Christie.
And I'm Kelly.
And before when we share our little tidbits, we'll try to be like, this is Hannah speaking or whatever. Stephanie will keep us on track so you guys don't get confused or crossed over.
I will. And it's the first time that I've been on a podcast with 5 women, and it's really exciting to me, but we're going to make sure and keep it nice and organized for you guys. So Carissa, why don't we start with you? What trend have you been noticing, and what do you want to spotlight today?
I want to talk about some trends that I noticed in fantasy. I think probably the first one, and maybe everybody who reads fantasy has heard of the new Romantasy, which is romance with fantasy, but I'm told that is not to be confused with romantic fantasy, and I'm kind of not sure which is which because I think people disagree. But basically, Romantasy is a fantasy world with a very strong romantic plotline at its heart, and I think one of the largest trends we've been seeing with this is fae or the fairy. Have any of you guys heard of that or read anything with that?
I am a newbie. This is Stephanie. And finally, I decided I was going to read basically my first fantasy book this fall. And I started with A Court of Thorns and Roses. And the fae was brand new to me. I was like, what is this fae? So I'm new to it. I've read the first book. I loved it. But I had never heard of it before in my life. And I was like, a fae is a fairy. So
yeah.
Yeah, same. I read A Court of Thorns and Roses. And actually, Chris, I remember texting you a couple years ago. I'm like, it's my first fantasy book. So I think I read a couple of them.
I feel like it revived that genre. was Sarah J.
It
Maas's
did.
ACOTAR just kind of revived it. All of us Twilight girls were like,
Yeah.
something for us
Actually,
on a more
yeah,
adult
that's
level.
what I kind of am saying is like Fae is the new vampire because it's kind of this. It's not really Fae as it's not really Fae when you consider like the history of it. Like it's kind of this new version. They're almost like elves. They're like immortal and superhuman, and so a lot of the characteristics that kind of like that modern protagonist vampire love interest seem to share. But yeah, Sarah J. Maas, I think she kind of kicked it off, and it's just become this like whirlwind. Yeah, so it's interesting.
Totally.
The Fae was really a part of like Celtic mythology and like in those regions and in Europe. So it's basically like anything that was unknown in the woods. They're like these trickster creatures and they would like spit out your babies, and that's where changelings come from. So yeah, it's definitely come a long way from that. So I think it's really interesting the way we see it today as sort of this like idealized perfect human.
They're definitely attractive,
Yeah.
all of them. When you were describing them, I'm like, and they're also very, very hot, whether you're
Yeah.
male or female. It's just this whole
Yeah.
world. Going into the fan art black hole after I finished, I had no idea that it was such an enormous, not even subgenre anymore, just a real, world out there. But the fan art's fun to see how these amazing artists put a visual to these fairies.
Yeah, and I think, do I think it's here to stay? I think maybe not, because I think it's been around for a while, and I think it's time for something new, at least in my opinion. But I do wonder if dragon books are coming back, because I haven't read it, but I've heard Fourth Wing is just like incredibly popular. And then on NetGalley, I saw another dragon book coming out soon. And so I'm wondering if now that's a trend that's catching on.
I'm here for the
wonder.
dragon.
And
Fourth
yeah.
Wing was a good one, and it gave you that Hunger Games feeling that we all got. Well, I was a teenager when Hunger Games came out, and it was just like that feeling that you got like, okay, I have to just devour this book. But the second one, not so much.
Aw.
But that's another topic. But yeah, I think dragon books are definitely having a moment, and I think Fourth Wing is largely to thank for that. So I'm eager to see how it trends.
Was Fourth Wing a sad book? Did it have a sad ending? Or was it
From what I haven't read the
Remember?
second one, but from what I understand, the second one was the one that ended sad. Has like everybody was like their jaw was on the floor and they were like dying for the next one because it kind of left them hanging. There was some like deaths, like character deaths and things like that in the first one, but it wasn't like I didn't like cry or anything. If that makes sense.
Is the third one?
And I was
Okay.
like,
Is the
fully
third one
in
out?
it, like, in it. I don't think it's out yet.
I don't know if the third one's out.
I think it's on the way.
However you say that, but I don't think it's out yet. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So Kelly, have you read past the first one in ACOTAR?
I read the second one and then I stopped. And we should be clear for our listeners, those are open door books because
Yes.
sometimes we try and be real careful on the Lit Lady side with what, like we kind of encourage our listeners, like heed your own conscience on what you feel you should read. So those are open door books. So,
Yeah.
but I haven't read Fourth Wing. I just read a different book by that author and I was crying. It was over the weekend. I started crying.
wow.
So I haven't decided if I'm gearing up for Fourth Wing or not. So anyway.
Hannah, would you say that Fourth Wing is spicier than ACOTAR, or are they about the same? I didn't think the first book was that spicy personally, the red one, but I hear it like goes up.
Yeah. So ACOTAR, I stopped after A Court of Frost and Starlight. That was like the Christmas novella kind of in the series. And I did not read I started Silver Flame and I put it down because in my opinion, she made a big jump from like PG-13 to R.
That's kind of why I
with Silver
stopped.
Flame.
Yeah.
The language and the spice was heavier.
Yeah.
And then Fourth
Mhm.
Wing, there was like one or two scenes, and I would say you could skip it, but what happens during those scenes is essential to the storyline. And so it was kind of,
Yeah.
I don't know, but I
Mhm.
think I would say A Court of Mist and Fury and Fourth Wing are probably on the same plane, if that
Good to
makes
know.
sense.
Okay,
Comparable.
got it.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
wouldn't feel comfortable with my
Well,
teenager reading A Court of Thorns and Roses, but I didn't even feel comfortable reading a Silver Flame one. I was like, oh, okay, gotta put this up.
yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of why I
So
didn't
Yeah.
it was a big
continue her
jump,
other
a big jump.
series. The is it Crescent City? I just felt like it was more about that than about the world. Like
Yes.
I thought the world was stronger
Mhm.
in the ACOTAR series, or just the first two that I've read.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can agree
And
with
it'll
that.
be
as far as
interesting.
City.
Yeah. I'm curious to see what happens with this trend. And a big
Mhm.
part of me finally just taking the plunge is just, someone who kind of lives and breathes books. I mean, these
Yeah.
books are on every single bestseller list time and time
Mhm.
again, multiple of them. I don't know if that's sort of dropping down right now, but I think it has shown us that adults do like to read some fantastical
Mm.
elements. So I think there will be new things, like you guys said. I think there will be maybe dragons, who knows what else. But yeah, it feels to me, as someone who had Twilight and maybe college, it
Mhm.
definitely had that same vibe
Yeah.
to it that I really
Divine Rivals is really
enjoyed.
good too. It's got
Yeah.
a much stronger. The fantasy elements are very light, so I always recommend that for people who are
Mhm.
they like the romance. They kind of want to get into romantasy, but they're like afraid of all of the other stuff, like the world you have to learn, and overwhelmed by that. It's actually
Totally.
very yeah. The fantasy elements are there, but it's very light, fantastic romance, and yeah, much more tasteful also in the open
I
door
will say
aspect.
Yeah.
I lean more
Yeah.
towards like the romantasy than the full on fantasy
Mhm.
because I feel like with some of these fantasy series, the second book is always like an info dump. Like they're still building the world to an extent, but all the politics and the war start coming into play. And I'm like, just give me the romance, like just give me the the magic and all those things. And so I feel like some of them I'm kind of like, so I feel like the romantasy is definitely picking up, especially with romance readers wanting that magical element. So yes.
Yeah. Well, that was fantastic and an essential trend to cover. So thank you, Carissa. And all of you listeners, we'd love to hear your thoughts. So get up in our DMs, leave comments. We want to know what you guys think. Are you enjoying the romantasy? Do you think it's here to stay? Are you hoping we see something else? Let us know. And next, we will move on to Hannah, co-host of Book Solid. Hannah, which trend is on your mind today?
I have been curious about bookish books. So, what I mean by that is books based on those that are in the literary sphere. So, like authors, publishing house books, books about editors or ghostwriters, bookshop books. I know across all genres, you see lots of historical fiction bookshop books. And I feel like they're having a moment in romance. I feel like there are a lot that are coming out in 2025, 2026 that are bookish books. And I am just curious if that's a trend that we will see continue. Like, are we, as literary people, are we craving those books? Or is it just something that's selling right now in the moment and it's a good move for publishing houses to pick up those books right now and it might not be in a few years? So I'm curious to see what happens.
What do you
with
think?
that. Do what?
I was going to say, I like reading bookish books, but I feel like it's cheating when the author writes their main character's occupation is a writer. I'm like, no, you didn't do any research on
Cheating.
another occupation. Like, you just threw something you already knew in there to make it easier to write.
Totally.
Flexible hours. Like, it's hard finding those jobs when you have to have someone on the run and then, oh, wait, they have a 9-to-5 job. No, they can't. Oh, I'll make
Yeah.
them a writer or a photographer. That's a close second.
It's so funny. It's true. Freelance characters have a lot more flexibility. I wonder what non-bookish people think of those books. Listeners, let us No, well, if you're listening, you're probably relatively bookish, but if you're not a writer, I don't know. I feel like I really enjoy those books because they're set in like the bookish world, which feels like my job, workspace in air quotes. Like I loved Meet Me in the Margins by Melissa Ferguson. That
Yeah.
was my favorite one of hers that I've read, and it actually has done really well. It might even be her most popular, which is perhaps telling, but if you know nothing about the world, is that cool and exciting or is it boring? I
I've
wonder.
heard,
Mhm.
yeah,
Well,
You know?
you
Yeah,
got mail.
I've been
That was two
curious.
I've
bookish
heard
people.
someone say like, oh, no one wants to read a book about a writer. Like pick a different, like it was cliche or something, but I kind of don't agree. I mean, I think they all turn out so differently. And if you're a bookish person, of course you want to read about a library or a writer or a bookstore. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yes. I
And
feel
you've got
like
Misery. That's a
we
movie.
tend to gravitate towards those books because when they're done right, they make you bookish people just are a different breed of people, in my opinion. They have brains work differently, they have different personality. And you see a lot of like extroverted introvert readers and authors. And so I feel like when they do the character justice and write it in a true way, that it just makes readers or authors feel seen, like, oh, there's characters out there like me. So I think, or that's how it is for me, at least, because some of these Melissa Ferguson's Meet Me in the Margins, hearing how she was writing the book and she was working on these things and all this stuff is swirling in her head 24/7, and I was like, I feel validated now in all my crazy with with stories and things like that running through my head. So, but I am curious, as like Stephanie said, do people that aren't in that sphere, are they intrigued by it, or are they just like, okay, like you took an easy way out and wrote about what you know? But I always feel like those are also the best books, is when we, as authors, when we write what we know best and that we can really breathe life into what we already know. So I'm curious if it's here to stay or not. I don't know. I think we had this conversation with Elizabeth and Stephanie Bruni at Tyndale at ACFW, and they seem to think that it was a good trend, that it was definitely something that bookish people enjoy. But will they continue to enjoy it? I don't know. I don't know. I'm curious.
See, and my theory on this, I have no basis. So after you said the ladies at Tyndale have their theory, I'm like, well, who am I to say anything? Um, but I think that we've seen so many authors come out with like their annual book a year on bookish content. Like Emily Henry, for example, had one a
Yeah.
couple of years ago. So I kind of wonder if these authors have already used that subject or that trope. I don't foresee that they would keep using it over and over again. So I'm kind of
Yeah.
wondering if it's peaked in the market because so many authors have done it. I mean, I think we'll always have books about books. That will always
Yeah.
be an underlying consistency. But with so many authors using that right now, I suspect that it will change and not be such a hot topic.
Yes. Because
Yeah.
I know.
And with that, it is.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, with that, as with any topic or similar book, it's just so much harder to stand out, right? And I listened to a podcast recently. It was fabulous, as a writer, with Jenna Bush Hager and Emily Henry, about just her success. And it was fascinating to hear her perspective on Beach Read really blowing up in the pandemic. And she credits that largely to the fact that people were home and had more time. And it was just a book that made people happy. But that's such a bookish book. It's about two writers, enemies to lovers. So bookish. And Emily Henry has continued to pump out
What's
bookish
her other
books.
one?
I
It's
think
like
Her new one
they're
is going to be
all
bookish, isn't it?
I thought there was one like Book Lovers or Book Lover,
Yeah.
but I haven't read it.
There
Yes.
is.
Yeah, there is
Bookstore,
book
bookstore
lovers.
setting.
And her new
They're
one is
not
bookish,
all
isn't it?
bookish, but her new one is.
I thought it was. And so is Melissa Ferguson's new one
Yeah.
as well. So I'm curious.
And then screenwriting is another sort of bookish book adjacent
Same
concept
personality.
that I enjoy that too. But yeah, we'll see what happens. I think that's interesting that the Tyndale girlies said that, but I do think, to me, it does feel timeless in a way. I think we'll always see it in some way, shape, or form. Someone mentioned You've Got Mail. That's a case in point. And that's more, it's a bookstore book, obviously. But gosh, that book has captured the world, I think, forever and ever. So Interesting. Well, thanks, Hannah. Another great one. Christy, your turn. Which trend are you going to share with us today?
It kind of piggybacks on the whole romance trend, talking about how a lot of the covers are cartoonish figures. I feel like anytime you go into a bookstore, there's sections upon sections of just, and obviously they're romance rom-com, because I don't think political thriller would go over great with a cartoon cover. And then we were talking earlier about the different kinds of covers, and we were laughing about the historical market. To me, has like headless characters, and like I realize that sounds bad, but the covers are all like shoulders, like the back of their
Yes.
shoulders, or you might get a chin, but
Totally.
they're essentially headless. So I do think that covers appeal to a wider range of readers, because I think when you pick up the book, like you can't tell, is it an older couple, a younger couple? Is it, you just have basically a vague skin tone at best. And I think it's easier, and since the younger adult market is on Instagram and socials and Bookstagram, Book Talk, whatever, everything, they're spreading those pictures around. So it results in, I guess, hopefully book sales. And something else I had thought about, or someone I read, was that, the other ones you have, Unsplash, like wherever you get your photographs from for a book cover, they may not have diverse populations to be able to use for your book cover. So it's easier to have like this cartoon. And then what else? Oh, I was thinking too, if you think about romance books and you think about back in the day, you had like the Fabio with like the flowing hair. Like, I mean,
Totally.
you didn't really want to take that out in public and read that, and everyone's like judging you. So
Right.
this way, but I will say too, I guess the counter flip side of that is when you have these books, you don't really know what level of spice is in them. Like bodice rippers, you know what's going to happen. Whereas these books, you don't always know, because they look so friendly, kid friendly even. But there's no real warning label. I almost think books should have it.
You'd never know. Like,
No.
I don't know if y'all have seen those
So,
reels on Bookstagram, but it's like a husband, and he'll like pick up his wife's book and be like, "Oh, this looks so cute," and flip through it, and he's like, "Oh my God, what is inside this?" And it's like, but that's the truth. You go there and you see these cute covers, and it's so deceiving as far as like, warning, this is spicy. Like, no clue.
And I feel like there should be like a spice rating, or like PG-13, like some kind of rating, because honestly, like my daughter is a teenager, and
they
I
appeal
see these cute little books, and I have to Amazon and I have to read 30 reviews to see what's mentioned, to see if it's okay, because I have my own TBR pile. I don't have time to read both of them.
I wonder if that could ever be a thing, ratings for books. Like they do it for movies and television shows. I feel like that should happen. Because you're right. We have
entertainment.
we have to scour so many reviews, and I don't know. And then people could say
my 7-year-old is starting to read chapter books, and it's even a thing because when we were young, it was like Old Yeller, and you got this picture of a real dog on the cover, or Where the Red Fern Grows. And even her like little chapter books are cartoon kids. They're cute, and they're bright pink and yellow and blue, and they've got sparkle inlay and all that. But I still have to be like, okay, I've got to sit down and read this 12 chapter kid book before I let you read it, because I don't know what's in it based on the cover, because you just have no way. So I think a petition for ratings on the side of the books should be like one little chili pepper would be nice.
Exactly.
Well, like if you think, like I go to IMDb to look up movies, it'll have like parental guide, and it'll have like language, and it'll have a rating, like sex have a rating, violence have a rating, and so it's like, it doesn't have to be anything like good or bad, just like a simple rating, like this is mentioned in this book or whatever.
Yeah.
And almost all books insert a trigger warning now, so it could be on the same page as your list of trigger warnings. Just be like, okay, spice level this. So that's a good idea. I interrupted, sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kelly.
Oh, I was just gonna say, so do you think it'll stay the illustrated covers?
I have noticed more, just tiptoeing, Carly Fortune comes to mind, of that more kind of watercolory sunset it's different than like the bold, like flat
Mhm.
color cartoon. It's a
Like
little bit
Rebecca Searle's
dreamier. I'm
latest.
seeing Rebecca Searle's new cover, I thought was
Mhm.
very Carly Fortune, her paperback for expiration dates, right? And it was different
Mhm.
than her former. I love Rebecca Searle's classic covers. I think they're so beautiful
Mhm.
with like the elegant font, and sometimes there's some silhouette people, sometimes there's gold and silver, but I have noticed a little bit of that. But there are so many cartoon books and it seems to be so hot and everywhere that I don't know if I'm seeing it going away anytime soon.
I think it will. Everything comes and
What
goes.
Yeah.
Give it 20
One
years,
I
it'll
think
come
a
back.
lot.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it depends too on what demographic your publisher views your book to be for, whether that
Mhm.
be
Yeah.
20s to 40s seem to be gravitating towards that cartoon cover. But I know like my mom would go
Mhm.
into a bookstore and she would be much more inclined to read an Emily Henry book if it had real people on the front. She would probably pick it up, the
Yeah.
same
See, I like
book with a
filling in
different
the blanks
cover.
myself.
So
Mhm.
Yeah. What was that, Christy?
I was gonna say, I like filling in the blanks myself. Like, I don't like to have a super defined picture on the front because,
Yeah.
like, everyone has different tastes. And most of the time, my taste is not like your clean cut guy
Mhm.
in a tux. I mean, unless I'm feeling poor and then I want a clean cut guy in a tux. But generally speaking, I want like some scruff on the face. I want
Mhm.
more rugged looking man. So
Yeah.
I like to be able to just have like the vague outline and then my brain can just fill in the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which
I
is
know my
what a good cover
2
and a good writer will do.
I know my 2 indie
Go ahead.
friends that are publishing, when they were designing their cover or working with their designer to do their covers, we argued back and forth over and over, and because they would text and be like, "Okay, go to Pinterest and find the guy that you think my main character looks like," and we would all send a starkly different view of
Mm.
this dude. And they'd be like, "His hair is not brown." I'd be like, "I don't care. That's how I pictured him. I'm sorry."
Mhm.
So I think, like you said, it's kind of you've got those people that are like, I don't really want to follow the exact character description. I want to fill in my own little man here.
So
So
one
I'm
interesting
kind of
thing I learned about
Yeah.
covers a couple years ago, I think it was from like a workshop with Steve Lobby, and he was talking about how the trend has changed just in being more simple to read, especially like the title text tends to be very prominent, very large and easy to read because of the internet. I mean, where do you buy most of your books, or where do you discover them at least? Like on the internet. So I wonder if that has something to do with it. It's easier to see what the image is if it's a very simple
Visualize.
cartoon.
Yeah. That makes so much sense. And I'm only using this because it's literally the only one on my counter right now. But listeners, I'm holding up Funny Story by Emily Henry, and the title is enormous.
Yeah.
Like, you're not missing that, right? And her name. And it's so true. If you're browsing Amazon or Instagram or any of these platforms, yeah, you need to be able to see it. Recognizability is huge. Hannah, not to put you on the spot and you don't have to answer, but as you are working on a rom-com, do you envision a cartoon cover, or have you thought about it?
I
Any
have given
thoughts,
this
or do
too
you not
much
want to say?
thought, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
I've given it because I hate the cartoon covers, to be completely honest. Like, if we really got down to it, they're not my favorite. And I battle, even with my writing, I battle this internal thing of, is this not, I guess, mature enough? And does this come across as like an impactful novel? And what makes that people, like Where the Crawdads Sing, for example, you look at that cover of that book and you hold that book and you're like, this is a book. Like, this is a whole book. And I think I battle that a lot. Writing rom-com is like, okay, is this impactful enough? Is it people are going to pick this up and be like, this is good literary work? And so I feel like the covers, as bad as that sounds, when cartoon covers first started trending, I was really like, if I write a book, I will never do a cartoon cover because nobody will take me seriously. But they are what's selling. They're what bookstagrammers want to take a picture of them and put on their feed. And I think Bookstagrammers had a large hand in pushing the cartoon covers because they show up better. They make cuter pictures and things like that. So I don't know. I'm still praying about that one, where where I land on, because I know it would just fit the book better, but I'm still, and being
Yeah.
traditional, you kind of have to go where you're led as well. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. And it'll be interesting when that time comes for you to have those
Mhm.
conversations. You're going to have a team with you, and
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll have insight on
Yeah.
whether that's still trending. And then traditional still plans ahead so far that
Yeah.
sometimes it's like, okay,
And
in a
I know,
year, is
like,
that still going to be?
Yellow, for example, none of her covers are cartoon. Her last cover was brighter. Low Country Lost was a much brighter book than any of her other covers have been. But an Indigo Isle, I think it was just like designs. It wasn't even like an actual
Indigo
picture.
Isle was beautiful.
So
Yeah.
gorgeous,
So
right?
there's
Mhm.
so many options and way, but I think it really comes down to how do you want people to feel when they pick up this book? Do they want to feel like they're fixing to dive into what world are they fixing to dive into? And for rom-com,
Yeah.
right now, I feel like the cartoon covers really just fit the bill and suit, and they're selling.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah,
it's hard.
totally.
It's tough.
Well, yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm muted. Sorry,
You
I
are
was
muted.
muted.
You're
That's
back.
okay.
Sorry. Hannah, I want to say writing a book is impactful. If you can get
Yeah.
yourself, 80,000 words on a page, that is impactful. And
Definitely.
rom-com has its place. Like, you're providing that escape for people. So don't doubt that, first of all. But second of all, I was going to say, like, what else would you imagine a rom-com cover to look like? Like, what other options would you think would kind of fit rom-com?
I don't think
That's
I
great
think my
question.
mindset around the cartoon covers has come a long way since they first started popping up. And I think I struggled with it mostly because most of the books that I was reading personally, I didn't read a lot of rom-com before I started writing rom-com. And so I was reading mostly historical fiction and, like women's contemporary and those heavier kind of topic books. And so I think since my brain was in like that mode for so long, it took it a while to be like, oh, these are cute and these are fun. Right now, I really don't see that there's any other option. Just with the way the market's
Mhm.
trending and with the way the space on the bookshelves and bookstores, they're wanting those books that they can put on that book talk trend table and they can put on the Bookstagram shelf and stuff like that. So right now, I really think that unless you had just a super fun, like Stephanie said, that kind of watercolory, realistic painting almost kind of cover that really you can't get away from it. Just because rom-coms are supposed to be bright and happy to an extent, and so your cover should match your book. So it's kind of, yeah, it's a tough one
It'll
because
be interesting because, yeah, even the books that kind of are rom-com but lean a little more women's fiction, like a Catherine Center or an Annabelle Monaghan, have a cartoon cover. If you think, I'm just thinking this
Yep.
through in
And
real
Abby
time, but they kind
Jimenez,
of all do. And yeah, even if they have that heavier subject matter in addition to the spice, it's kind of, it'll be interesting
And I know that on the
to
back
see what
end,
happens.
there is probably a whole team, like especially if you're traditional, there's a whole team doing all the research on what is selling. And if they think your book will sell, then they know what they need to put on the cover of your book to get it to sell. So I guess when you're traditional, you just have to kind of trust in that as much as you can. So, but it's trending even with indie. So I feel like it's what's selling right now. That may change, but right now it's what's working.
Yeah. Tyndale did a great job with Becca Kinzer's new rom-com
Yes,
coming
it's
out. I think it's
super
really
cute.
cute. First Love,
Yes,
Second Draft. Like,
I
I'm
love
with
it.
you. I've never historically been the hugest cartoon fan, but when I saw that, I was like, they did a perfect job for her. It feels
Yeah.
timely, but it still feels a little bit different. I
The
like the
ones
color
I
scheme.
still have
So you're
problems
going to
with
be,
are the cartoons with no face. Like they have a face,
Hmm.
but they don't have any facial features. No, yeah.
yeah.
I need a face.
Oh my God. Christie's like, I don't want the face. I want to imagine my
I want to
squawk
imagine
eyes.
my face.
Oh my
But at
gosh.
least they have a face and they're not headless historical
I
books.
know.
Yes,
I've never really thought
It's
about
any
it in that way, but it's so
historical fiction
true
book,
that
it's
Or
they're
it's like the
headless.
back. The
facing
woman's
the
looking away.
war.
It's like
Yeah,
the
the
back of
back.
her. Yeah.
The back is big, yeah. It's so funny. Well, that was another great one to dissect together. I love all of that, and we're going to be eagerly waiting about your cover. If
Yes,
you
me
need voters, or we're happy to help weigh in when the time comes. Kelly, let's move to you, Kelly. What trend would you like to spill today?
Okay, I want opinions on this. I want to talk about Bookstagram.
Ooh,
So,
let's
I'm
do
um,
going
it.
right away. I'm getting
I know.
off now. Bye. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Um, I am just fascinated by the topic of Bookstagram, and so many books have gone viral on Bookstagram or Book Talk, right? Like TikTok's
Mhm.
version of it. And it's propelled authors into these crazy, wild, successful careers. And I think all five of us are authors. It's this beast that we have to deal with. And it's this never ending question. Do you focus on this platform to sell your work, or do you work on your work? So I want to talk about it. A couple thoughts I have, but I really want opinions on this. Quick Google search, it looks like 2019, 2020, 2021, lots of information about how to become a bookstagrammer.
Mhm.
And then I found this article by Thomas Umstattd Jr., who is, I would say, arguably one of the top voices, at least in the Christian market, with marketing. And he made a couple comments that as he works with best-selling authors, he's noticed the more successful an author is, the less time they spend on social media. He says, what makes you a successful writer is ... wait for it, your writing. You can't
Mhm.
Facebook or TikTok your way to publishing success without first being a good writer. And then he said, becoming a bookstagrammer is not a good strategy for most authors. Instagram's not a platform that primarily focuses or celebrates writing. It celebrates and features beautiful photos and videos.
Mhm.
So I'm just so curious about this, because I feel like I've heard opposite, where we have got to have a strong platform. So let's talk. What do y'all think?
I've heard
I just wanted to say that I am a living, walking, breathing science business experiment right now, because I am on submission. And this is just pertaining to authors and following specifically. There's a lot more you said and that I think we should unpack together. But editors that I've been submitted to came back and asked for specific numbers related to my Instagram following for both accounts, for the podcast, for my mom blog from back in the day, for my website. They want those numbers. They are not viral. They are not massive. I have a 4-digit Instagram following. I've never had more than that. And recently on the podcast, she's always encouraging me because I have that lower following, but it's very engaged and authentic, to me. It's like, feels very natural to me. But we've had Martha Hall Kelly. She has sold millions of books. She's somewhere I think she has maybe 8,000 followers. We just talked to Ariel Lahan, who has 6,000 followers. So you can sell a lot of books to a certain audience without that huge following, but I will report back on how much it matters and what kind of situation or deal I'm able to get or not get. How much feedback do we get in terms of that? I have no idea. And we talk about it so much on our podcast, and we ask so many guests, how about platform? How does it matter? And when I had to submit those numbers, I'm like, this is actually going to show in a way how much it matters. So I think that's a bit inconsistent sometimes in the information we hear. At ACFW, it seemed to be very much like the number of your following doesn't matter. It's more about you showing up in an authentic way, which I think all of us are doing on our podcasts. I think that's a really meaningful way to have a platform that's not defined by Instagram. But
well, I
I'm
know
curious to see it actually
it
being
does
on
matter
submission, what it
for
means.
nonfiction. They really want you to have a platform first.
Absolutely. Yeah, and they're really, I feel like agents, even a lot of them put that straight up on their website or submission guidelines now. Like, if you don't have a big platform, don't even bother, kind of thing. But anyway, I know that was kind of a ramble, but it's just hot on my mind because it's been on the back end for me, something I've been sending lately. So yeah, I want to hear what everyone thinks about Bookstagram. In particular, doesn't have longevity as the marketing vehicle,
Yeah, because I listened to a podcast and he had said something about social media doesn't necessarily transcribe into book sales, because
Mhm.
when you're scrolling, you may see something and then you keep scrolling, like you don't pay attention to who is posting. Like, and I
Mhm.
was like, oh, that's so true, because there's so many times I forward funny videos. I'm a big dog video person, and I will forward dog video pictures or videos. I don't have any idea who they are. I don't, half the time I
Mhm.
don't follow them, so I mean, but then at the same time, like, for instance, T.I. Lowe's book, Indigo Isle, someone had posted a picture of it. And I thought, oh, that's a beautiful cover. Let me go
Mhm.
look at that. But they were saying, I guess most of the time you won't do that. You won't leave that social media to go look up a book. You just keep scrolling, thinking you're going to remember
Mhm.
it later, which you all know you never do. So it's funny because sometimes I think it works and sometimes it doesn't. I don't know. I don't know the
I
science
think
behind it.
I could be wrong, but I think you were listening to Thomas Upsett
I think it was him.
Jr.'s podcast, because I remember him making that point, and it might have been with Jane Friedman. I don't know if she was the guest on
I
that
don't
day, but
remember.
she's also an expert, and he did make that point that social media doesn't necessarily translate to sales.
But it's so visual, and I'm such a visual person
Mhm.
that like I said, if I see a cover, so this is where your book covers have to be, then
Yeah.
I will go look it up.
Mhm. I
I think that.
have heard, and oh yeah,
Go ahead.
I heard slash read it in an article somewhere. I know that's so annoying to say when you can't remember specifically, but it was about book talk. And there have been situations where some viral, probably Gen Z book talker posted about a book, and then within 24 to 48 hours, that book was like on the top 10 Amazon list. So
Mhm.
there are those
Mhm.
instances that happen, but I don't spend time on TikTok. I don't even fully understand the power of book talk. I don't even think, other than that it's changed the game and Pauline Hoover runs the world. I mean, in the secular space, she just sells so many books and it's always credited to book talk.
Mhm.
So it's interesting because there are those stories, but I'm with you. I don't know that it actually, affects sales in the way that we would assume.
Mhm.
I feel like it is a double-edged sword. One girl that I repeatedly think about as far as book talk is Alex Astor. She wrote Light Lark and Sky, I think her new one's Sky Shade or something, but she's a fantasy author, and she had gotten rejection after rejection on Light Lark, which is it's YA. I haven't read it yet, but anyways, she's gotten rejection after rejection on Light Lark, and she posted a video and said, would you read a book, and gave the elevator pitch for the book. And the video went viral, and within the next 48 hours, she had like 10 agents emailing her saying, we want this
Wow.
book. And the book's been out at the top of the New York Times bestseller. It came out like 2 years
Wow.
ago, and it's been at the top literally every week for like 400 weeks or something. So like Stephanie said, there are instances in which it happens. I'm going to go out on a limb and say I don't think Colleen Hoover would be what she is without it. And I've read a few of
I
her
agree.
books, and that's all. I'm just going to say that. And I think a lot of people
Also,
can agree.
big spice warning for anyone who hasn't read her. Just saying that for both of our
Yes.
podcasts. If you have not read Colleen Hoover, R+ rated. Just
So I think that most people would agree that she hit the COVID book talk wave when everybody was at home and
Yeah.
bored and reading. I've heard her say that in more than one interview. But as far as Bookstagram itself, I do feel like it is, I'm not going to say dangerous territory for an author, but it is tricky territory for an author, especially if you're not defining yourself, okay, I'm an author who engages with Bookstagram, or am I a Bookstagrammer that writes books? Does that make sense?
Okay, so
Um,
well, I was going to ask you to clarify that a little bit, because I think that article I was reading from Thomas Umstattd kind of said the same thing. Like, there's a difference in being a bookstagrammer and being an author who's trying to become a bookstagrammer. So
infiltrate
how would
Bookstagram.
you define? Yeah,
So,
how would you define the difference?
one of the things that I specifically asked my agent when I got the book deal with Tyndale was, do I keep posting on Bookstagram because my audience is built off of my book reviews? And my audience is built off of me, going live with other authors or with authors, because I was just a bookstagrammer then. And my whole platform was built. I joined Bookstagram in 2021 with no intention of writing a book. I mean, it was not on my radar. Did not. Of course, it was a dream. I'd always wanted to do that, but I didn't know it was possible. And so I joined Bookstagram because I got a gift card and bought some books and took a picture and thought I was starting something new. But anyway, so I had specifically said, what do I do? Do I keep reviewing books? Do I keep making book content, or do I switch gears and go full writer? This is a writer page now. And my agent advised me just to keep doing what I had been doing before to build the audience that I had built. And so that's something that I've really struggled with, is like, am I author now, or am I still like considered a bookstagrammer because I'm still reading and sharing reviews and things like that. I will say that I've pulled back on the review end of things, just because I don't want another author getting on their page and blasting my book when my book comes out. So I've kind of, if it's 5 stars, then I'll share it. But other than that, I've kind of pulled back on reviews. But I think it's really hard when you go from book blogger to author. I would say if you're an author, then start an author account. Don't try to book blog and also be an author, just because it's tricky space to navigate. There's a lot of ethical questions raised as to, should you be reviewing books? Should you be sharing your opinion publicly and things like that? But I also think on the other end is readers want to know what authors are reading. Readers want to know what you enjoy and what you're reading too, because they want to know you more than just an author. And that was the biggest piece of advice that my agent gave me when I was asking all these questions. She was like, your readers want to know Hannah. They want to know, what's going on in your life. Share what you're already sharing. So I feel like it is tricky. As far as Bookstagram as a trend, I feel like it's a whole mess right now. And will it continue? I don't know, because it's not the same Bookstagram that I was a part of in 2021 and 2022 even. So I'm curious to see the future of the fate of Bookstagram community. So that's my hot take.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the hard thing is, when I think of having another book come out within the next 1 to 2 years and having indie published 2 books, Bookstagram was such a huge part of my marketing and doing PR packages and all of that. And I remember a year ago when I released my second book, I asked Devin Daniels, I mention her often. Hi, Devin. I said, do I do this again? Like, it's a cost to me to like send out these PR packages and like give free books away. How big is Bookstagram? And at that point, a year ago, she was like, if you don't do that, like, what else is there right now? And I kind of feel like right now it's like, what else is there? I think there will be something else new. We just don't know what that is yet. And unfortunately, because we're humans and we're messy, it will be a matter of time before that next thing gets messy too. But I do sort of wonder if there's a bit of a Bookstagram fatigue going on between what I see traditional Bookstagrammers posting about how they don't have time to actually read that much. I think it's actually really hard to do real life and read 10 to 20 books a month, let's be honest. And then just sort of a little bit of a weariness I'm sensing. And I don't know what else that would be, or what traditional publishers have to say, if they're still going big on the Bookstagram outreach. I would think so, because again, what else? But I think we're going to see it shift in the next season. It's my
I agree.
opinion.
And I will say that my biggest piece of advice is not to put all your stock in Bookstagram, because one thing I struggle with is, like Stephanie said when we started talking about this, was you've got Martha Hall Kelly with her 5,000 followers or however many she has, and you've got Taylor Jenkins Reid, for example, posted just a few weeks ago, and we opened up a discussion on the podcast page about it. Is she just posted and was like, straight up, like, peace out, y'all. I am done with social media. My team will handle it. Granted, she has a team, and a lot of people I talked to were like, well, I don't have that luxury. I don't have a team. And like, I understand, I get that, but I also know a lot of authors, even indie authors, that are like, okay, I'm writing my book. I won't see you guys until it's finished. And then they get on when the book releases, they promote, and then they're like, okay, bye, I'm gone again. I think there's no right way, because I, as a content consumer, I want to know what your life is like. I want to know what Martha Hall Kelly eats for breakfast. I mean, I want to know what her every day looks like. And as somebody trying to navigate this world new and fresh, I want to know all the secrets, and the way to know people's secrets is social media. But it also gives me hope to see these authors that just don't care one bit about social media, that are doing all these great things. Like Emily Henry, there was a Times article on her a few weeks ago that was like, Emily Henry never going on tour and being a bestseller and author. And I was like, you never see her active on social media. She's never been on tour. And here she is with movies being made and all that. So I feel like there's no guidebook to Bookstagram, and there's no guide on how to leverage it really. And I think I just remind myself all the time that people sold books before social media, and the New York Times list was around long before social media was, and people were still getting on it. So anyways, I don't think we can put too much stock in it.
I love that. And I agree. I think in my heart of hearts, if Bookstagram or social media hasn't peaked, it will soon. And, the question to answer is, how will readers find books? If it's not Bookstagram or social media, what will it be? Now, maybe it'll be podcasts. Maybe it'll be Discord. Maybe it'll be something else. Like, there'll be some other avenue, because the marketing principles are the same. It's always product, price, place, promotion, but it's how it's distributed. And I think in my heart of hearts, I predict the Bookstagram's going to go slowly downhill.
I'm going to venture out and say that it peaked in 2020 through 2022. That's just my take from being deep embedded in it, is that it really peaked, because that time, and I post about this all the time, I'm like, can we please get back to that? Because I kid you not, 2021, any given day, I would have 3 to 4 books show up in the mail and have no clue who they were from. And it would just be like, I love you on Bookstagram. And I know that I wasn't the only one. I have friends that are Bookstagrammers, and they were like, I got like 4 or 5 books a week just from people just being kind to each other, and seeing that somebody was going through a hard time and saying, hey, your baby's sick, here's a book, or here's a Audible credit or something like that. And that, not that I want free books, but that whole mindset of let's support each other has shifted. And I think a lot of that has to do with influencing and that as a career, and people chasing those numbers and seeing that there's money to be made in Bookstagram. I haven't seen any of that money, but people just realizing, I could do brand deals with blanket companies or candles or whatever, and I could be making money off of this. And so for a lot of people, I think it's turned from a escape and a passion project to a career, or chasing a career for it. And so I think the whole culture of it has just changed. And we're not going to get into it, but I think the past month on Bookstagram has definitely shown that the culture has changed. And so I think I'm going to venture to say that the peak has happened and we are in the fall.
Yeah. And I don't know if this is too much to say, but I was just really discouraged in the last week or two, reading so many of the posts on Bookstagram where I'm like, I just want to read about books. I don't want to read about all of these opinions. So It is an interesting thing. So, okay. I've said my piece on Bookstagram. Go ahead.
I know. Christie, any thoughts on the Booksta?
I was going to say, I did see something the other day, and maybe it was Courtney Walsh who had said something about it. Something about...
Now, I love her so much. Go ahead. Sorry.
I do. Just some really good. That's okay. I think it was her. There was something about, I guess there was a question going around about should authors pay for reviews? And I was like, why is this a thing? Do we see, I would say the top 3% of authors are making bank. The rest of, you're making pennies. You're not why? And then I think it's just, that's one of those things too, that the wealthy system where like, you could write a crappy book, but if you pay someone, more than likely they're going to write a good review. And then it's like, so I was like, no, you shouldn't pay for reviews. Like, that's insane. That's
Yeah.
my
I
2
think it's hard
cents.
to keep
I
up with
agree. And I
Bookstagram.
noticed a
It's just hard to keep
huge,
up with and be consistent, and you just have to really love to
Yeah.
do it. Otherwise, it's just a stressor. That's what I've found. I have fun doing it
Totally.
sometimes. I was a
yeah.
photography minor, so it's kind of a nice creative outlet for me. But then
Oh,
when I pressure myself, I don't have fun with it. So
yeah. I love to share the books that I read and love, and I still do that in a way that feels good to me. But something I was going to say, which aligns with exactly what you said, Hannah, I have said this before on the podcast, but releasing a book myself in 2021 and 2023 was drastically different. And in 2021, it was exactly what you said, Hannah. Literally the sweetest Bookstagrammers, many of whom I'm still in touch with, were friends. Like they were so excited to get a book for free, like read it and give an honest review. It just felt so collaborative and beautiful. And in 2023, I would say there was still that. Like those tried and true, like it was there, but so many people. Well, now I charge $175 for a post, $200 for a reel. I'm like, no. And I'm like, that is not ethical. Like, I don't think that's right. And I think it goes into the Bookstagrammers putting a lot of time into it, and they're wanting to monetize, which to a degree I understand, but that just muddies the water. So I noticed a big change in, I don't know if entitlement is the word, or frustration, or just feeling like they should be compensated, but it was less of that warm indie support welcome in my experience the 2 years apart. And I think that will only continue to be, I've seen it on Threads a lot, that topic of paying for reviews. And yeah, I just feel like,
Like if I read a good book, I want everyone to know what a good book it was. If I read a bad book, you're just not going to hear about it because I'm not going to write a bad review and share it. But yeah, like that's, I guess, my way to help out authors, like spread the word, is that word of mouth.
totally.
And
Yeah.
as a consumer, you don't want to think, oh, this person only posted because they were paid $200 for the reel. I want someone to be authentic and share what they really like, because we all love books. We want good recommendations because ratings are escape. So I don't, that doesn't settle right at all to pay for posts and reviews.
Totally. Well, that was a good discussion. I feel like we could talk about Bookstagram for a whole episode, but I'm glad we dug into that. I am going to end with one more trend, and we'll keep it pretty quick. And I'm going to do this one because it's changed my reading life, and I think it is here to stay. Just going to lead with that. And that is audiobooks. I think audiobooks have really exploded since 2020. I know they've exploded because of what I've read and the people that we've talked to. We did a podcast episode with Talon David, who does a lot of audiobooks with HarperCollins Christian, and she also freelances for many, many more than that. It was really interesting to get a behind the scenes look at her journey and her career in audiobooks, and she testified that audiobooks really boomed in 2020 and have only continued to rise because of the pandemic. People just had a new kind of time. They were walking, listening to audiobooks. They were in their home wanting an escape with their AirPods. So that kind of started to kick things off. And then I read that this past year in Q2, for the first time ever at HarperCollins, audiobook sales exceeded ebooks. So that was kind of a moment in history that people are listening more than they're swiping. And I just think it's fascinating. I've also noticed more and more original Audible titles where it looks like authors are actually writing audiobooks, like for the sake of listening to, like that's the end goal. So I think that's really interesting. And I think we're just going to see more and more of that in creative ways. I know that there's more and more full cast productions, which I know can't be cheap to produce. So there's money being pumped into it. My agent has told me that audiobooks are a huge hot thing for agents trying to get deals for backlist books if they don't have an audiobook yet. It just seems to be a trend that's on the rise. But that's my experience. I've discovered I love audiobooks. I love the ability to fold laundry, run some errands, and pop in a book. I feel like it's dramatically increased my ability to read books I might not have otherwise read. Like I can read more
Same.
because of it.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan.
It's good for the mom
Yeah.
life.
What
for
do you
sure.
guys think about?
I probably read like 2 to 3 audiobooks for every physical book. I just don't have the time to read my physical books. Even though I prefer them, I don't comprehend as much on audio, but yeah, I still like it. It's at least I get the books read. Yeah.
Totally. That sounds exactly like my ratio. I think it's like 2 to 1-ish because I can just like gobble them up. And yeah, it's not, I don't think it's the same, but I think it still counts.
I was going to say, I am going to shock you because I have literally listened to one audiobook my entire life.
Love it.
Well,
Hannah,
my drive to work is 7 minutes.
Yeah.
It's zero time. And then prior to working at a clinic, I used to do home health. So that was a longer drive. And I distinctly remember the one book I read was a Stephen King book.
Ooh.
And I was like, or not read, but listened to, and I think it was on a CD in my old car. And I didn't want to get out of the car to go see my kid, my patients. I was like, oh my gosh, he's getting ready to kill her. Oh no, she's going to get away. And like the whole time with my patient, I'm like, what is happening? And I would get in the car and like, I was like, this is not conducive to work. So I don't think I do listen to podcasts when I clean the pool. So I guess I could do that. But I feel like too, I'm such a visual person, even though it's just reading words, it's a better way for me to comprehend something. Like if I'm just listening, my mind is also seeing and thinking other things.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
I am with you. You're not alone, so don't feel bad. Stephanie's actually who got me on the audiobook trend, and I was like, I can fold laundry while I can do other things, but I also have that brain too where like when I have a book in front of me, I am focused on that book and I'm taking it in. When I listening to audiobooks, I'd be like, oh, I could write my scene like this, or I would write it like that. I would do this. And trying to do all the things with it. But I will say thrillers are superior on audiobook. That is the genre for me. Like if I'm going to do a thriller now, I'm like, is there an audiobook and what does it sound like? So I haven't ventured into like romance or anything like that on audiobook. But I've listened to I'm about halfway through Meet Me in the Margins on audiobook. But I keep finding myself being like, oh, I should just buy the book and read the book. So I'm in the middle. I'm in the middle. But as far as it being a trend, I feel like it's definitely here to stay there because you've got those, auditory listeners and listeners, obviously, but learners.
I need them to come up with this, like, oh, go ahead. You want to go? I was going to say, I like when I read on my Kindle or my Kindle app or whatever, and then I have to go somewhere. I wish it would just auto translate to audio.
Yes.
And then go back. And that way, like seamlessly, I can read. And then when I can't read, I can listen and then go back and forth. Like to me, that was something that needs to be invented.
Yes. You can do that, but you have to own both formats.
Yeah, like it's not going to probably keep up with it. Like where I am, I guess if I bookmark it.
No, it does it for you.
Does it?
It literally saves your spot. The thing is, that's the thing is I've only ever done it when it is a package deal because I'm not going to pay for a book twice.
Yeah.
But if you're reading it on your Kindle and you do have the Audible, they talk to each other and you get in your car. But who's going to buy the book twice?
I mean,
that's convenient though.
But if it's on Kindle Unlimited and you want to spend a credit, it is convenient. But yeah, it's very interesting. And I have noticed that the Bookstagrammers who put out, I'm trying to think of one. Well, there's many. If they're reading like 10 to 20 books a month and they put like the format that they read, a lot of the time it's literally like headphone. Like they're listening to a lot of books so that they can give us a review.
Yes.
But
I think as writers, I don't.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, as a writer, I don't have a lot of extra time to listen to a book. I'll read books a lot when I'm at that point where I'm like checked out. But if I'm, awake enough to be doing something, I either need to be writing or like, I don't know. I feel like I'm just doing chores in the midst of my day. I never have that chunk of time where I'm like, I'm going to spend 4 hours on a chore right now. So shorter increments are better for me to listen to things. However, I don't think there's a bad thing you can say about audiobooks. I think it's fantastic that they're in the market. I think the demand will just increase. And I think it catches different types of readers, which is great. It's that diversification of how to ingest the material.
Yeah.
I have a question, since I don't listen to audiobooks.
Yeah.
Are there background noises in audiobooks? Like if someone's driving a car, is there the noise of a car, or is it just somebody reading? Because back in the day, it was just somebody reading. So I didn't know if things had changed now to make it like almost like movie-esque interactive.
It's just the voices, just the
Okay.
voice
And are
actors.
they different
And
voices?
yeah, in a dream world, there will be like if it's a dual POV rom-com, the
Mhm.
girl chapters will be narrated by a female and the male chapters by a male. They don't okay, it exists. We learned from Tal and David it would be called duet. I have never listened to one where they actually record the chapters together, where the male they would be talking to one another, but that is definitely more rare. Yeah, it's just talking. However, I don't think I could do audiobook with Akatar for a number of reasons. I think I need to like ingest the world in the traditional way. But I did a preview of a full cast experience, and it is sound effects, it is music, it is full multicast duet. So they did that, I think, later after the book really popped. So it does happen, and I do suspect we will see more of it.
And
'Cause
see,
it
that makes sense though, because like if I listen, okay, so I was listening to The World's Greatest Showman, you know, the movie.
oh,
So
so
when I
good.
listen to the music, like I am playing the movie in my head of
Mhm.
everything. So I feel like that's almost like if you add all the voices and you add the sound effects, it's like you almost get the kind of the same, and the imagination fills in the blanks like it does the rest.
Yeah. I just have to imagine the cost to produce that
Mhm.
would be really high. So at that point, I mean, how much are you going to pay for the book versus how much it costs to produce it? It has to be
Totally.
something like an Akatar that is going to hit so many people. It's not going to be your small indie book because that's like way too much to produce. I would
Totally.
imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, this sounds very expensive. The Akatar one, I was like, "Whoa." It definitely an immersive experience, but maybe even a little too immersive. I was doing the preview when I was walking my dog. I take my dog for 30 to 45-minute walk every single day, and that's kind of my podcast audiobook time, and I turned it on, and I was literally, like, looking like, really feeling the vibes, so it's interesting. I think, yeah, I think they're here to stay. I think we'll continue to see more of it. And yes, even here, the fact that I'm a huge fan and all of you guys are like, "Eh, maybe sort of like it captures different types of readers. I have some girls in my IRL real life book club that I'm a part of, and they just shamelessly will not read a book, but they always listen to the audio, but they never used to read at all. So it's kind of turned them into readers who will come and participate. So I'm like, that's a good thing. It's getting people ingesting the material. So
I will
Okay, I
say,
have a random comment.
yeah, go for it, Kelly.
Just as we have been talking today,
Yeah.
the number of times on these various trends that we have mentioned in the year 2020 is fascinating. And
Oh,
now
yeah,
I'm looking back thinking, did 2020 just really change the book world? Because we're talking about
oh
it
yeah,
with book covers, we're talking about it with audiobook, we're talking about it with Bookstagram, like we're talking about the whole game. So I just find that fascinating that we're just now seeing the results of what books did in 2020 and how they've influenced the market.
I think I
Interesting.
saw
I'm
somewhere
so glad you pointed that out.
I think I saw somewhere that the romance genre was dying. That well, not dying, but it was declining, and it was really only those your older ladies reading these like Fabio books that was seen as romance genre prior to 2020. And I want to say, don't quote me on this, but somewhere I saw an article that was saying since 2020 romance book sales are up like 85%, and their romance takes up over 80% of the market right now. And that's only happened since women were stuck at home during 2020, and this new wave of romance that wasn't these Fabio westerns and whatever came through, and people were like, oh, there's normal people in romance. But that's all been since 2020.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like it
And
really changed the game. Bookstagram, romance book, everything. I feel like it's audiobooks, all of it. So
I know.
I
We were just having a very organic, unplanned, planning, but speaking from our hearts today and just naturally talking about 2020 as much as we did. It's a real thing. It's a real fork in the industry that took it in a lot of different unexpected directions. And yeah, I think we're just going to continue to see the impact of that point in time.
Yeah. And then what will change, right? Like once we're further from that time, how will things shift? And that'll be fun to watch and see.
It will be. Well, I loved all of the trends. Thank you guys so much for doing this with us. I hope that all of our listeners from Lit Ladies and Book Solid really enjoyed this. It's fun to just dive in and share our own opinions. Hannah and I interview a guest almost every episode, which we absolutely love, but most of the time it's us asking them for their, thoughts, and it's fun to share our own. So thanks for being part of it, Lit Ladies.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us. Yes.
Of course. I have a feeling this isn't our last. We will have to do this again. It's so fun. And we're just your biggest fans and cheering for you guys, and so happy you're doing it.
Vice versa. Hey, you're our real friends. Like book friends, real friends. We're all of it now.
I know. All of the above. Well, thank you again. And thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in today. I will link all of our social media accounts and our websites for you all. And we're just so happy you're here. Bye.